You don't have to know a comprehensive view of everything in order to know that it's true. And I think that's what's part of the journey, when, with doubting and questioning and wondering, is sometimes you think I've got to have it all figured out before I can believe in something to be true. And that's not at all what happens.
Well, welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, friend. This is your host, Janelle Wood, and I'm so grateful that you are back today because I am joined by two co-hosts that I love, and one of them is here for the very first time on a group recording, and we're hoping she doesn't run away after this, so we'll find out. Katelyn, you're back. You're back.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello.
Joining us from the UK, all the way over there.
No British accent yet.
Oh, man. Bummer. I expect more from you next time.
Are you trying to get it? Are you trying to get the accent?
I'm trying to either get one or marry one, and it's not working.
God. 0 for 2, Katelyn. Bummer.
Every day.
And then we're also here with Sarah. Sarah, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, yeah, of course.
I love it. Sarah, you always have such great questions, and you usually research whoever it is we're going to be talking with. Did you research today's guest?
I try to. I listened to your podcast that you did, I think, a year or two ago this morning. So, yeah, I've heard a little bit from you, Alycia.
Awesome. And Alycia Wood is back. We share a last name, and which is wonderful. Yeah, and also, you have a new podcast, and you're working with a wonderful ministry. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that before we dive in.
Okay, sure. Well, hi, ladies. Thanks for joining us today. Or I guess I'm thankful to be joining you, whichever way it goes. But yeah, I work for an organization called Apologetics, Inc. And we are super easy to find at apologetics.org. So even if you forget my name, forget the name of where I work, you'll remember apologetics.org. I mean, that's pretty easy. And we are a speaking ministry. We have speakers that travel and speak to various places and different environments, universities and churches or conferences, whatever. We also write articles. There's different articles. We actually have different, it's not just us that write articles on our website, but we actually bring in people to write articles on various different topics. So they're not just us. We have one really cool article on Hebrew Israelites, which is something that a lot of people don't know about. But if you walk past them on the street one day, you'll know, who are these people? Because they stand out. So we try and get, different people who are doing apologetics to write some articles with us. And then we also have a series of podcasts and YouTube channels. The Mike Sherrard podcast, Matthew Middleberg has a YouTube channel. And then I have a podcast called Hey Alycia. And it's really simply that. Hey, Alycia, why do Christians believe this? Or hey, Alycia, why does Christianity advocate for this? Or why would Jesus, teach this or whatever it might be? It's really meant for non-Christians and also Christians who are just trying to understand their faith better. And they send in questions to me. So I answer questions on the podcast that they send in. I also answer questions that I get when I'm out speaking, because people ask me a lot of really good questions when I'm out speaking. And I'm like, here's one I had recently. And I answer on a podcast. And then I even have a third kind of option where people can actually, we have a section called Say What. And in the Say What segment, people actually can respond to my answer. Like, Alycia, what did you say? Like, I don't buy that answer, or that's not good, or you missed this, or you should have said this, or you didn't answer it fully. So I allow people to kind of write back in and say, hey, I actually didn't like your answer. Here's why I didn't like it. Yeah. And here's what I think you should have said or what you missed. And so we have a Say What segment as well. And that kind of gets in. So one question episode, and you'll find it once a week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or on apologetics.org.
That's great. We'll link it below in the show notes. And Alycia, for someone who doesn't know what apologetics is, because I didn't hear that term until I was in my 30s and I grew up in the church. Okay. Would you mind explaining what apologetics means? It sounds like an apology. I know it's not, but for those listening who aren't familiar, would you go ahead and explain?
Yeah, it certainly does sound like an apology, right? Makes no sense in American English, British English. You have a career in apologizing. Are you really that bad? Like that you have to go around and do it? But it actually comes from the Greek. And if you understand the Greek, it makes much more sense. Because in the Greek, the Greek word is apologia. And if you can hear kind of how it sounds, it's apologia. So apo means like from or to, and logia means like logic, reasoning. So you're using logic, reasoning to advocate for something or to talk about something. So It was actually when I was going to school in England, my PhD atheist archaeology major friend who explained it to me so well. She says back in ancient times, because she's an archaeology major, so everything is ancient, right? A lawyer would give an apologia on behalf of their client. So they're going to give an argument or a reasoned defense as to why their client is, innocent or whatever. And so that's what apologetics or apologists are. They are people who use the mind and your intellect and reason and logic to talk about why whatever they're saying is true. So you could be a Muslim apologist. You could be an atheist apologist. I happen to be a Christian apologist. So there's different ones that you could be. And so, yeah, that's kind of what it is. What I'm not going to do is go up to somebody and say, here's a Bible, believe it. You're not going to get that from me. What I want people to follow things because they actually believe it's true. And they actually say, okay, out of all the different options, this makes the most sense. Yeah. And so that's what I do.
Love it. And before we get to these young women and their questions, would you mind sharing a little bit? I know we could talk at length about this, but I'd love to hear a little bit of your faith journey, because I know it wasn't always like, yeah, I really want to go tell the world about Christianity.
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't always that. But I think I was that annoying kid that had a lot of questions. And I was very inquisitive about everything. Still am. I love learning about everything. So I meet somebody and they have a career that I don't know much about. I'm like, oh, tell me all about it. Like, I want to hear about it. Or if you sit down on a plane and the person next to you is a pilot, you're like, oh my goodness, tell me everything, So that's just me. I just have a lot of questions. So it would make sense that I would have a lot of questions about Christianity. And so I was just very inquisitive about Christianity. So I would say I started doing apologetics as a teenager, not knowing that was a thing to do, like that was a field. It was just, I always just kind of felt like if non-Christians have questions about Christianity, I want to be able to help them answer it. And on their journey to knowing whether or not this is true. And then when I was in college, I discovered The Case for Faith by Lee Strobel. It was a book. It was in the library. I was doing research. And that gave a name, apologetics, to the very thing that I had already been interested in doing. And that was the first time that I was like, wow, this is actually a field and it's called apologetics. And there's people who do it and they're answering all the questions I was trying to answer myself. And so that kind of really opened me up to it. And eventually this is where God has landed me. So.
Did you go through your own faith crisis or time when you weren't sure about God?
Oh, 100%. I mean, really in college, and crazy enough, Christian college, Bible class with an amazing Bible teacher. Like that was when I was like, I don't know about this thing. Maybe I don't know what I think about this. And that was really when I struggled and really was like, there's just no way there's a God. I don't know if I can hold on to this. But what's interesting is that when you say there is no God, okay, there's no God. You still have the same questions, though, that everybody asks. How do we get here? Is there a meaning to life? Do I love my neighbor? Do I hate my neighbor? What happens when we die? All of these questions, they're still there. Just that when I took the God piece out, I had the same questions, but I had no answers, right? So you need to answer them with something else. And for, so some people might, they'll become Muslim and Islam will answer those questions, or an atheist will have to answer those questions. Like, in other words, the questions are still there. When you remove God, it doesn't remove the questions. It just changes what the answers would be. And I think for me, as I kind of wrestled, it was like, okay, Alycia, you can say there's no God, but now you don't have an answer to this question. What's the answer then to this question outside of God? And it made me have to start rethinking and realizing my big stumbling block against Christianity, just because I didn't know the answer to a question. That doesn't mean there isn't an answer to the question. It just meant I don't know the answer to a question. And there's a difference between there's not an answer and I don't know the answer. And so I think part of my, just even later on in life, I would say, like when I first read the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code, and the Council of Nicaea created the divinity of Jesus and all these kind of things. And I'm like, it did? I didn't know that. And that was in my 20s at that point. And then I looked it up and I realized, Dan Brown has really bad history. Just atheist historians were like, this is bad history. That's actually not what happened. But that's when I realized, Alycia, just because you didn't have the answer, there was an answer out there. You just had to find it. Don't freak out and panic every time. And so there's been a bit of like having to realize that, doubting and questioning that's actually part of a lot of people's journeys. A lot of people, I am not a Christian today because I have all of the questions answered. That's an impossibility. It's an impossibility for every mathematician to know every single thing about mathematics. They don't. Mathematicians don't know everything about mathematics. They know certain things about mathematics. They know they're true. There's other things that they're trying to figure out or that maybe they disagree on. They don't even know what they don't know yet, what they haven't discovered yet. But just because of all these other things they're unsure about doesn't mean that what they are confident about isn't true. You don't have to know a comprehensive view of everything in order to know that it's true. And I think that's part of what's part of the journey, when with doubting and questioning and wondering, is sometimes you think I've got to have it all figured out before I can believe in something to be true. And that's not at all what happens. Man, if we had to have it all figured out, we would empty our prison systems out, because we don't know everything about a crime before we send somebody to prison. There's just no way. We have a good chunk that points in this direction, but we're not all knowledgeable about anything. And so I think some of the doubt journey that I've had to go through is realizing you're not going to understand everything, and that's okay. You don't have to, just know that something is actually true. And so that's part of my story.
Well, I'd love to dive deeper into that, but I want to turn it over. I would say of all the young women that are part of this cohort this season, Sarah and Katelyn have some great questions, maybe objections about the Christian faith. I think you're a great guest to throw a bunch of stuff at. So go for it, girls. Katelyn, go right ahead.
And whatever I don't know, Janelle
Whatever
is
you
so
want.
excited to answer.
Well, and Katelyn, here's what I'm going to say. Katelyn and I just had this, this was a couple months ago, but it just aired as we're recording this yesterday. And so I got to re-listen to our conversation. And we talked about great stuff that she's just big ideas that just don't make any sense about Christianity. And so Katelyn, any of those kind of things. And if not, I had a refresher course yesterday in some of the things you said. So it's up to you what you want to share.
Again, just I think I purposely have blocked out due to just social anxiety of I don't ever want to see myself being perceived again. I'm never going to watch that video. I have no memory of what I talked about. Can you throw me a bone? What?
Yeah. We talked about science and about how it doesn't seem to make sense, about the history, and how can we really believe Christianity is true when all these other religions also claim to have truth. We talked about what might happen when you die, and it just seems like maybe Jesus was real, but also kind of a made-up story. And people can believe whatever they want, but it's hard to even be interested in something that is associated with hate for certain groups of people. Is that a good overview? Some of the things. And I just also want to give this caveat because I think it matters to you, Katelyn. Katelyn is a very respectful, very kind person, and she wanted to be very sure that she doesn't offend the Christians who might be listening. And I just want to say, you're not going to offend anybody. Go right at it.
Yeah, they're fine. They'll be fine.
Okay. What kinds of questions are you normally asked?
Yeah, wow.
I don't want to sound like basic or anything.
No. I mean, honestly, all the ones
level up.
I mean, right. You don't want to sound basic. I mean,
no pressure, right?
Mm-hmm. No, I would say that honestly, the list that you just asked that Janelle talked about, I mean, I would say probably all of those are, I would get. People really, it's a combination. Some people will ask questions because they've had bad experiences in church. Maybe they grew up in a church. Maybe they've encountered a Christian. And so they're trying to make sense of, what do I really believe about Christianity? Or what's really true about Christianity? Or is it just evil and bad people? Other people, have questions pertaining to maybe just things that they've seen on the internet. Maybe they watched a video of somebody saying, this is why I left Christianity. Here's this problem, this problem, this problem. Some people, kind of have their questions kind of come from that angle because of just different things that they've said. Other people are just kind of like, I've looked at this and I'm just utterly confused. And the idea that God would send his son to die just sounds like infanticide. Like for some people, it's just like, this just doesn't even make any sense what I've heard about it. So I guess I would say my questions are kind of all over the place because it depends on kind of where people are at. Yeah, That's kind of it. Like they kind of
Which
just what might be on their minds.
which begs the question, where are you at, Katelyn? Give a 1 minute synopsis for Alycia so she can know where you're coming from.
Hey, Caitlin. I don't think about it too often. If I had to put a label on me, it would be atheist. Janelle kind of mentioned of the idea of a lot of things I just being respectful, I just don't really understand how someone could believe in a lot of the like historical bits, and then have it like transfer over like logically into the modern world and still actively want to believe. Um, I worked at a Catholic school for my first job teaching last year in London. So that was like a bit of a sucker punch to the face of suddenly being thrown into a brand new environment. The school I work at now is no longer Catholic. And it's definitely different in terms of environment, students, expectations, the society all around it. I've made a new friend here who's a really interesting one who I'll start to pick her brain just like she's not on here, but Kaylee is my friend who's also on the podcast. And so she's a Christian, but she doesn't celebrate anything. No Christmas, no birthdays, no Easter, no nothing. So I'll start to pick her brain. If I can get back to her, I'll tell Janelle about it and keep her updated.
Is this a different friend? Are you talking about a Jehovah's Witness friend or?
I have no idea. She keeps talking about these sorts of like, oh, haha, happy not birthday. I'll buy you like not a birthday drink. And so she's just like, it's very vague, just little cookie crumbs. And it's getting me interested in what is actually being baked.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, so it's cool to hear. But
so when you say some of the historical stuff, Caitlin, that you find it hard that people, it'd be, it's illogical for them to believe it. Give me some examples.
I mean, like the parting of the two seas. Did Noah actually put two of every single animal on a boat that he made, and then like what? Everything was destroyed. Just like things like that. The actual genuine turning water into wine, or the walking on water sort of thing, and like why that's not seen anymore today, I guess.
Okay. So no, that's great. So like supernatural type stuff, basically, right? Yeah. Seas parting. I guess maybe Noah putting animals on the ark isn't quite supernatural, but seas parting, walking on water, like the kind of some of the supernatural stuff seems a little bit bizarre.
Yeah, so like I absolutely could believe that Jesus was a person and he came with this radical idea and like it spread from there. It's going like the beyond that of wait a second. Hang on.
Sure. Yeah, no, that makes sense. So it's going from the natural to the supernatural type realm.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Let's make it even trickier, Caitlin. Let's throw in this virgin birth. Like, are you serious? Right? Like,
yeah,
what are we talking about here? Right? We're just like let's just keep adding levels of complexity, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I totally get it. And what about like miracles and stuff like that?
Mm-hmm.
Would that be like,
are angels real, biblically accurate angels, like that kind of thing? I've seen like horror stories about. That is a question. I guess it's kind of like a left turn, but like I was thinking about it the other day when I think they mentioned like Dante's Inferno or something, but I'm just interested into what heaven and hell would look like. To like, is it a general overview? Is it personal to everybody? Do you believe that like those that aren't Christian are gonna like be in hell? Or just heaven and hell I've not thought too much about. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, I want to interject one more thing that kind of came up in our conversation that I forgot to mention, and I think this is a big one. I asked you, Caitlin, if anyone had ever explained the gospel to you, and you brought up a chastity ring. Do you remember that?
Yes, my aunt. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And she wanted to know if I would wear a chastity ring for her, and I said, no, that's okay, thank you. Yeah. And it was a bit of a moment for her.
That's probably a little awkward conversation there, Caitlin.
Yeah, it was in a car.
Oh.
All of my family in it. Yeah.
Oh.
Love her. Love her so much. Bless her.
Oh. Oh, so you just didn't take the ring?
No, I mean, no. It, I it would feel like I I would feel like I would be scamming her for something that she believes so wholeheartedly in, and I would
Hmm.
like superficially take it. Didn't
So
agree.
is your family Christian then, or was it just her?
Um, I'm an only child with just my mom and dad, and we're not religious at
Okay.
all. So I just didn't grow up in a religious atmosphere until I moved in with that aunt and uncle after my dad and I moved back from Europe. And all of a sudden it was kind of like a go to church. And I wanted to
Hmm.
because people pleaser.
Right. Oh, yeah, I understand that. So when we look at like the, Christianity talks about, that God created everything. Okay. Now we can evolution and we can talk about all that kind of stuff if we need to, but evolution is just a process theory. It's not an origins theory. Evolution doesn't have any theory as to how we got here. Well, I shouldn't say theory. There is no explanation within the scientific community as to how we got here, right? Evolution just says that once things happen, here's how they went from more simple to complex, etc. So Christianity, so there's a hole within the naturalistic. So you can think, like, when I say naturalistic, I mean anything that doesn't involve supernatural. So you have the natural world and the supernatural. So the natural world, which would be the world of like an atheist, the world of an agnostic, where all that exists is the physical, material, natural world we have. So there is no explanation in that world for the origins of how we got here. And there's different ideas, multiverse and, different ideas, but nothing's really been shown how we can get something from nothing. So within Christianity, there's this concept and idea of a God who creates all of this out of nothing, right? He himself is not a created being because he's an eternal being. And so there was never a point where he had to be created, meaning going from non-existence to existence. So the creation of the universe, with all of its massive like details and the inner complexities of a cell and the way an eye functions and the brain functions and all the different things, every blade of grass and every little grain of sand that's on the planet, right? So we have this idea of God creating something of this size. When we look at that, does it seem out of maybe does it seem like out of the realm of possibilities then that same God that created all those things could take water and part it into two?
So thinking as if or putting into the mindset of God creating everything.
Sure. So if God created everything
Mhm.
and with all of its complexities,
Mhm.
if he could do that, would it seem out of his realm of possibilities that he could just take some water and part it into two?
No, but why doesn't it happen anymore then if he could do it?
Okay.
Which
So
I'm
so
sure is
it's
also
not
like a question you get all the time.
no, 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 no. Well, yeah, but that's okay. Like this, but I think that's a great follow up, right? Like, okay, but if he did it then, like, why not keep doing it? Like, what's the deal? It's like a one trick pony type thing, right? So I get it. I think it's a good follow up, and so yeah, so maybe then we've moved from like maybe the parting of the sea or turning water into wine isn't really that out of the ordinary or complex for a being that created everything. But yeah, why would he not still be doing supernatural things today, right? So why would it end? And that's a fair question, actually, Katelyn, because there's a sense too where I think it's like maybe if he did some of those things, and I'm not going to project on you because I don't want to say this is what you're thinking, but I think sometimes people think, why doesn't he just do those things today and then I believe? Like if he would maybe show me some of those really cool things, then I could believe, and
Mm.
I guess why doesn't he do some of those things today? I guess I would say too, actually, I do think he does. Maybe not so much the parting of the sea per se, but he does do some of the other supernatural things like miracles, like healing. So let me give you an example. I come from Rochester, New York, grew up on the Canada border. It was literally the city ends at Canada, which those of you from Washington would relate to that to some extent. Because you also end at Canada. So um so all that to say, there was a woman, her name is Delia. And Delia, she was from Buffalo, New York. She is from Buffalo, New York, which is about an hour and change from me. And driving to her parents' house on Christmas morning one day, and a Christian woman, and was hit by a drunk driver. She wanted to say she was in her early to mid 20s, hit by a drunk driver. And that left her with a traumatic brain injury, which caused her paralysis from the waist down. Okay, so she was in a wheelchair and she could move around, and she would come visit. I never knew her before the paralysis, but she would come to my church, and she had an amazing voice, Hispanic woman, amazing voice, and she would sing, and then she would travel to different places and sing. And people had prayed and prayed and prayed, and for her to be healed and for God to heal her, and she wasn't. She was still in this wheelchair. I would say maybe 20 years go by, close to 20 years go by, and she's at a particular church service. And because it's church service, there's cameras and stuff like that all around. And they're praying for her. And while they're praying, she starts saying, I'm starting to get like feeling and whatever in my legs. And then she's starting to say, I think I can move them a little bit. And she kind of tries to push herself up from the wheelchair a little bit and falls back down, kind of tries to push herself, falls back down. And eventually she's able to kind of get herself up and kind of wrapped around like the men that are around, and they're kind of holding her. And then eventually, she starts moving her legs and starts walking. And this video is actually on YouTube. So anybody who's listening can just check it out. Her name is Delia Knox. So Knox is Knox. Delia Knox walking. I want to say this happened around 2010, maybe 2011. So about 14 years ago. And she is still walking to this day, actually. She's fully walking. About a few weeks after this, I think at this point she was probably in about her 40s, probably mid 40s or something. It had been a dream of hers to one day climb the steps of her parents' house in Buffalo before they died. That was one of her prayers. And so a few weeks after she was healed and was able to walk, she did. She goes home to Buffalo. She gets out of this SUV with these high heels. I mean, this girl was not trying to come in some Adidas. Like, she was like high heels. And the Buffalo local news is there. The mayor's office is there. And she walks up the steps. Her parents were at the top of the stairs just bawling, right? Because she's walking. And so the mayor's office gave her some award and, things like that. Why do I say that? Because I do think that God still does supernatural things today. Now, and I think part of the reason why, because, I think it makes sense for me to then say, well, why does it happen all the time? Why doesn't everybody get healed, right? And that's a whole nother question. But I will tell you, in certain parts of the world, you will see healing. You will see healings more regularly than you will in other parts of the world as well. So to kind of get back to your question, this idea that it doesn't God, like, why doesn't he do some of those things today? I guess my short answer is he still does. And sometimes we just don't run across it. See, but the Bible's easy because you have the text and you can read that it happens. But until you meet somebody like me that can tell you that story, it's hard for you to know that it's happened. And so it's hard for us to even know that these things happen unless you meet somebody who's been healed or meet somebody who knows somebody who's been healed. And it can make it seem like those things don't happen today. Does that kind of make sense, Katelyn?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always nice to hear about those sorts of stories.
Sure. Yeah. Right.
Push back on what you're thinking, Katelyn. Go ahead. Do it.
I don't want to just straight up dispel.
Oh, dispel.
No.
Knock it down, Katelyn.
I'm not.
You're not going to offend her. Go ahead. Sarah will do it for you if you don't.
To say that this woman who for 20 years was in a wheelchair and had to overcome who knows how many hardships, the mental as well as the physical, that sounds so hard.
Right.
I'm so
Totally.
beyond grateful that I've never been put in a situation like that. To give credit to God in a miracle like that, it feels like it's taking away so much of what, again, in my own opinion, that is not meant to be mean, of that's just a little bit wishy-washy.
Okay.
Of praying healed her, and she got better. She got to do what she wanted to do. She got to wear her heels walking upstairs, which I can't even do.
I know, right?
No,
me either.
I'd rather live. It just feels like, what did the doctor say afterwards? Because I'm assuming she had to have had some sort of follow-up of like, oh my God, my muscles are in atrophy. I need to do something. What happened after that? It couldn't have been just, and then she just walked for the rest of her life without any complications? Or
Yeah, I mean, oh,
I
what
don't,
was that? Sorry.
no, I'm just interested in Miss Knox's story.
No, I mean, I think we all are, right? I mean, I think it's a fascinating story because you're like, what in the world? Like, I get it, right? And so I would say this. Um, the timing of the events are she's being prayed for, and then she gets up and walks in that moment, right? So you can see this, you can watch this, so you can see it in the video, right? You can actually see it in the video, the whole, I want to say the video is maybe, it's been a while since I watched it, maybe 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. I don't remember exactly. But either way, you see it in the video. So there seems to be a direct correlation between the people praying for her and her standing up and walking. Okay, just because that's what's happening when she's able to start walking. Did she do physical therapy and all things? I honestly can't speak to that part of it because I haven't had contact with her since a while. I mean, since years and years and years before when she was in a wheelchair. So I can't say what she had to do for rehabilitation afterwards. There's really no other explanation that I've heard outside of, well, maybe her brain figured out how to spontaneously heal itself. I've heard people say that to me. I was in school in Canada, and one of the atheists there said, well, maybe her brain spontaneously healed itself. And actually, I've heard it twice from atheists, actually. And I'm like, okay, but it just happened to spontaneously heal itself in that moment that this supernatural thing was happening, or was also claiming to be happening. Like, in other words, why didn't it spontaneously heal herself on day 4 or 5 or year 10 or something like that? And so what oftentimes I think happens is these kind of supernatural events, which we think, man, if I saw the Red Sea parted, or I said turn water into wine, like, again, we've established that if God created the universe, these things aren't that hard for him to do. It wouldn't be too out of character. But in the same sense, it also makes us kind of say, that's not convincing for me. In other words, even when we get evidences of the supernatural, that there might be something more, we have a tendency to still kind of say, well, maybe there's another explanation. And sometimes that makes me wonder, and this will be a question I'll ask for Katelyn or Sarah. What, in your opinion, because to me, it makes the most logical sense to say that this was attributed to the prayer. So it's a supernatural thing because that's what was happening when she walked. So in your opinion, you can each tell me, what would be, if for you, because it's probably going to differ, it might be different for both of you, what would be a way that God could show or demonstrate who he is, like that his existence is what I'm getting at, to either of you in a way that you would believe?
You go for it, Sarah.
Okay. So I do believe in God. So a little bit past that point,
Okay.
but I have gone through that question a lot because I do want him to be more evident than he is.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's easy for me to think that that would be very possible. And so I feel very frustrated that in a way he seems to hide himself and not make things as clear as at least I would like.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, what I'm thinking about with the supernatural question is because I do believe in the supernatural realm, but now I'm thinking, are the miracles we see today do they only tend to be the physical healing or like bodily um, change, or do we see other things happening that we could say are miracles, like things that happened in the Bible? Because with you saying about the brain being able to heal itself in some way, like if we could get to some sort of medical answer for that, then in a way we're closing the gap for God to be the one acting in
Mm-hmm.
that role. So I'm very curious now to do more digging on the miracles that we see, because I do believe, like you're saying, that they do still happen, especially in other parts of the world.
Okay. So what would be the evidence that you think might, like you said, you still have questions sometimes that he seems hidden. What could he give? What would he could he do then to be more less hidden?
Hmm. F Personally, I think that this is just my take. I think that he could be a lot more clear in history that um, it is him doing something. Like through the Bible, we have to trust this document that is 2000 plus years old.
Hmm.
Um, why are we having to have such a level of faith and trust in it if he wants us to know him so desperately?
Hmm. Hmm.
Why does it still feel like a stretch? Like, why is the field of apologetics such a needed thing if we're trying to believe in God and he's trying to show us him, then why are we having to do all this convincing? So
Okay.
I guess I
I
don't
like that.
I don't have a this is what I would do if I was God, but because I understand that there is a level of humility that we need to have, and I totally recognize my own limitation. Um, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to me about why it would be so hard in a way to trust him.
So why so hard to trust him when he wants us to kind of know that he's there?
Hmm.
Okay. I like that. So not quite. So maybe if he was clear in history, that would be more the evidence that you would need to feel more confident.
Yeah, I would like it to be more clear than it is. And I
Okay.
think, I mean, yeah, we could talk about that more, but Caitlin, why don't you give an answer?
Um, like for me to believe in God, and I guess there's definitely a separation, at least in my brain, of the like belief in God and being a Christian. And I think,
Okay.
well,
Okay.
so like for me to believe in this all powerful God with all of the history that has been documented, however it might be, because I've not done historical intakes on or research on it. Um, I I would need to see something huge like he used to
Okay.
do and less individual, I guess, because the miracle of Miss Knox being able to walk again is amazing for her. Awesome. So glad. I would need something so big enough that
Mhm.
it cannot have any other possible explanation. It cannot have any other possible explanation that maybe Miss Knox was not as truthful as as I would love to believe she is.
Sure.
Things like
Sure.
that. I would need it huge.
Yeah.
That or like I die and I end up in heaven and I'm like, oh, uh-oh, and then I like fall back down because like they would need to be like that. Not to be vulgar.
Caitlin, that's great. Right. Right. No, that's good. I actually appreciate that. I have some thoughts maybe on maybe both of those kind of things that you both gave, and then I'll maybe share a little bit and then give you guys time to ask some more questions afterwards if that works. Um, Going back to what Sarah had said, like why is apologetics needed if like God's trying to show us who he is, and it shouldn't be this like if it's so hard to like trust him and it should just be clear. Why do we even need it? And I think, Sarah, one of the things I've learned is clearer is almost subjective. So you can take the exact same situation. So for example, there's a time in the Bible where it talks about Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Okay, this man is dead. He's dead, been dead for several days. He stinks. Okay. And people know he's dead. And then he raised Lazarus from the dead. Same experience, but there's two different responses. Some people believe in Jesus and follow him, And some people say we need to kill Jesus because he just raised Lazarus from the dead, and we need to plot how we might kill Lazarus again. Okay? Because they were concerned that people would start following Jesus and believe in Jesus. So the same event, which seemed very clear to certain people, was that Jesus really can be trusted, was perceived by other people as, let's destroy him. Let's not follow him, but let's destroy him. And so some of the things that we think need to be clearer actually are pretty clear, I would say. But it has to do more with we tend to want more. Like it's more that it's not supposed that it's not clear, it's that it's not enough. We want more of it. So maybe we need 10 Lazarus raising from the dead. Or maybe we need 100 Lazaruses raising from the dead. And then maybe that will seem clearer. Apologetics is there because a lot of people don't even know, even if they grew up in church. Like Janelle said, she didn't hear about apologetics until she was like in her 30s, and I was in my 20s, and I grew up in church too. The reason why we have apologetics is because people don't even know that there's evidence out there. So it's almost like I'm just kind of like the information segue between what's here, with the evidence that's here and the person, and they just don't know this is there to even look for it. And I'm kind of like the information channel going in between the two. And I'm also kind of like the detective, kind of like looking at different clues and where does it point. And so I think the clarity thing, Sarah, is almost inconsistent between different people. And so then the question you have to ask is, why did these people believe? And why did the other people not believe? Why did the other people not believe? And that's where you have to start digging in to say, why didn't they want it to be true? Why didn't they want Jesus actually to be who he says he was? They didn't like that. And so now we're like, the issue isn't that Jesus isn't clear. The issue is that there's something in them that says, I actually don't want this to be true. And then to move on to Katelyn's, and if I didn't answer that, Sarah, you can say what me on not even my own podcast. And you can say, no, you missed it. So I will gladly come right back to you. What do you think? Was I getting kind of where you were going, or did I just completely take a different train?
No, I think you're starting on an answer. I think it just goes a little bit further in my mind because I believe that salvation is the most important thing for people to find. And if they are able to escape it so easily or avoid it mentally, that's a huge problem to me. I don't want it to be that easy to turn away from.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think in my searching, I have found a lot of answers, but also continue to seek for a lot of answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel frustrated still about, even when I'm seeking, that there is a lack of clarity available. So it just makes me feel like I have to trust God more than I want to or feel comfortable with. And I get that is
Ding,
like,
ding, ding.
that is, yeah, it's good for us. It
You
is
just
good
answered your
for
own
us.
question.
Yeah, but like, I want people to be able to find God. And like, even in saying that, I think, have I found God? Like, in a way, yes, but like you're saying, I want more, and I want to be satisfied in that. And why does it still feel like less than I'm seeking? Like, if the Bible says that we don't even seek God, that like he has to draw us. And I do believe there's a compatibility with like our seeking God and him drawing us, and it's not like completely one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But if I am seeking, then I would expect him to be close to me in that.
Yeah.
And so if I'm still like hitting the end of what feels like is out there to know, then that feels like a problem.
So Sarah, so you feel like there's kind of like there's a seeking that's being done, but you're hitting a wall. And the
Mhm.
wall is basically like the questions aren't getting answered or there's confusion. What's the wall look like?
I think it's the end of logic of like we have the information that is available, we can do the reasoning that we can, and then it is faith at the end of it that we have to step into. And and that is the wall that I feel like I'm I'm climbing and I'm like working on it, and maybe in a way it's getting easier and better. Um, but it I guess it makes a lot of sense to me why people would not believe in God, and it like feels very reasonable to me. Um, and that scares me
Sure.
because it in a way it just feels like I'm clinging to a thread that like could be cut very easily. And so sometimes I just feel like it's my stubbornness that keeps me being a Christian, but I also believe that it is God keeping me there as well. So some of both.
So is the wall then made up of things that you can't get answers to?
Um, ye, mm, Maybe. I think I'm right now I'm doing a lot of work of getting answers like through this podcast and other
Mhm.
things. Um, so in a way it like I'm saying it is getting easier, but then even in that, I know that they're just not answers for some of the questions that we have. Or maybe there's answers, but it's like it's just an option that you then have to believe. It's not like this is a true objective fact. And that's one
Okay.
of my problems with Christianity is
Got it.
we treat the claims like fact
Mm,
when really there's something that you have to believe.
got it. So can you give me an example? And I am coming to you, Katelyn, but can you give me an example of one of those things that you're that's on your mind that you're thinking of right now where it's like there aren't answers or it's just like options and you have to treat it as fact kind of a thing?
Hmm. Well, I'd say definitely the biggest one in Christianity would be the resurrection.
Okay.
Like people come up with different options to
Mhm.
explain how Jesus disappeared. Um, and there are options and you can believe any of them, and some sound more reasonable than others, but like it's not I don't think you can say Jesus was raised from the dead by God and that is a complete fact in history that
Mhm.
happened. I think it's something that we choose to believe in, and I think there's good evidence for that, but it's not historical fact.
Got it. That's a great example. So let me just share some thoughts on that. And I appreciate you sharing that, Sarah, because I think you've got some really valid points in there. So for any Christians that are listening, I think that she's raising some really good stuff that you maybe haven't considered, but you need to. Um, and and I would say this, Sarah. I think there are certain things in life in which we will get as close to 100% certainty about as possible. Okay. But the overall majority of things we actually don't need 100% certainty or we live as if we do have 100% certainty. So let me give you an example. Um, did you grow up with your mom at home?
Yes.
Okay. So tell me three things about your mother.
She is very kind to us.
Okay.
She homeschooled us,
Okay.
and she's a really good cook.
Oh, well, I hope she's listening. Did you hear that, mom? Okay, that's what she said about you're a good cook. Okay. Okay. So, Sarah, I've asked you to talk about your mother. You told me she homeschooled. You told me she was kind. And you told me that she was a good cook. Um, but you haven't proved to me that she's your mother. Like you're expecting me to assume that this is your mother. You haven't proved it to me. And and let's just say, I don't think this way, but let's just say I was to say, well, Sarah, that doesn't really mean anything, because I actually, just because you give me like characteristics of her, that doesn't really prove it, that she's your mother. But yet you had no problem calling her your mother. You've had no problem calling her your mother your whole life, even though you don't have 100% proof that she is. In other words, I believe you. I fully believe you. I fully believe that she's your mother. I fully believe the things you said about her are true. But the only way you can conclusively prove that is if you've DNA tested yourselves. Then you can actually say, okay, this is legitimately my mother. But none of us would make you do that. That's not how we live our lives. Like, how many of us have had to DNA test our mothers? Some people have to, because there's uncertainty. Okay. But there's plenty of us that live in certainty and don't even think a DNA test is what's needed, because we don't actually go ahead and try to 100% prove everything in life. And even with DNA tests, we know that there's always a chance that, it could be incorrect or whatever, to some, like 99.9%, maybe it's accurate. I don't know. But my point is simply that there's things in life that we actually believe in, and nobody think you'd be ludicrous to believe in it, even though you haven't conclusively 100% proven it. And so the reason why I say that is because I think sometimes when it comes to the biblical text, we want 100% proof. And my thing is, well, what does it even look like? Do I say, God, you need to come down here so I can DNA test you to make sure you're God DNA? Like, I don't even know what God DNA is. Like, what am I even going to test? If he's a spirit, I can only test physical things. Like, how would I even test him to know whether or not he is? So what do? I look at the characteristics and the aspects. I look at what it means if there's a God. It means that there's a creator. It gives us an explanation for the world. I look at if there's a God, then it tells us actually morality does exist. So the reason why you feel bad about punching your neighbor is because you were designed to hug your neighbor, not punch them. So if there's a God, then it does give this explanation for who Jesus is and blah, blah, blah. My point is simply that 100% proof isn't necessarily what's needed. I think it's I would say to before you and say, do I have 100% proof, Sarah, that God exists? No, I don't think I can say that, because I'd have to have a level of, kind of what you said, like historical verification in order to do that. And I can't go back into history and do some of those things. Can I tell you I'm more certain than not? Absolutely. Overwhelmingly more certain than not. Feeling very confident about it, but I can't necessarily 100% prove that, but I don't need to. In the same way, I don't want you to leave this podcast and go home to your mother and say, we need to have a DNA test. You don't have to do that, because you've got enough evidences around that let you know that she's my mother. And so sometimes when it comes back to things like Jesus and the resurrection, you're absolutely right. I can't prove that 100%. No way. But I will tell you that there's no other explanation. Nobody's ever claimed to have taken the body. Nobody's ever claimed to have destroyed the body. It's just gone. And his followers, who totally were like, you know what? We don't know this guy. We're fleeing. We'll leave him on his own when he was being crucified, were willing to themselves be killed, which happened in many cases. All Christian tradition tells us that 10 of the remaining 11 disciples, after Judas hanged himself, 10 of the remaining 11, Christian tradition tells us, died for their faith. So they said they believed that they saw him, the same disciples who saw him walk on water, heal the dead, heal the sick, do all these kind of cool things, and then still didn't believe. So getting back to Katelyn's thing earlier, they saw the supernatural stuff, and then they still abandoned when he was crucified. It was when they saw him alive that they couldn't run away from the evidence anymore. And that's what faith is. Faith is all about responding to the evidence. It's not believing where there isn't evidence. That's not what faith is at all. It's, here is the evidence. Are you now going to put your trust in this? And so I think it's a really great point you raised, Sarah. I guess I'm just not sure that we would need that level of certainty that we demand of the Bible, that we don't demand of other areas in our life, or that we demand of God that we don't demand in other areas in our life, because there's enough there pointing that direction. So I guess, do I believe Jesus rose from the dead? I do, because there's no other logical, rational explanation than that, because there's been no other evidence to the contrary that's been put forward. The only evidence of the contrary is that dead people don't rise. Totally agree with you, which is why it would have to be a supernatural event. So the Bible literally says God raised him from the dead. It also says Jesus raised himself from the dead, but that's another thing. So it had to be a supernatural type thing. But there's just no other explanation that anybody's given that's made any sense. So just some kind of thoughts I have kind of on what you said, Sarah, because I think it was a really excellent point. And I don't know if anybody's ever kind of asked me that before. So well done. I've been doing this 12 years. So way to pull one out the woodwork and throw it my way. So Katelyn, I've not forgotten you, but I like what you said. You want something so big and evidence so big that it cannot have any other explanation. And I get that. And I think you remind me of another atheist out there. Well, actually, he might call himself an agnostic, excuse me, who I think would probably feel the same. He's a philosopher. And philosophers, man, they just think and think and think and think and never land anywhere sometimes. Sometimes they just keep going around and they don't land anywhere. And I think he's kind of the same way. He asks questions. He'll bring Christians on or different people, and he'll ask them questions and they'll give him an answer. He's like, but what about this? And they give him an answer. But what about this? And they give him an answer. But what about this? In other words, what I've learned, Katelyn, is that there's always, but what about this possibility? Or what about this being an answer? So similar to the Delia Knox thing. Well, what if her brain spontaneously healed itself? Well, there's no evidence that her brain would just spontaneously heal itself in that moment. Out of all the moments in her life, why did it choose that? Okay, but what about this? Or what about this? And what I find is there isn't ever an answer or proof or an evidence that can be given that somebody can't say, but what about this? But what about this? But what about this? So maybe I'm Debbie Downer here, but I love your desire for that thing that will give me this and I'll believe, right? Where there's no other explanation. And then maybe I come in as a Debbie Downer to say, I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if it's possible for something to happen where there cannot be some other thought or pushback into the explanation. What we do is we believe in something not because there is no rebuttal to it, but because the other rebuttals are less likely than the explanation that's been given. So I believe that Delia Knox started walking due to prayer, not because there's no rebuttals about traumatic brain injury or this thing or this thing or this thing, but because those are much less likely of possibilities and they make a lot less sense than actually there's a direct correlation between what was happening in the moment and her standing up and walking. So in other words, I don't believe in it because there's no rebuttals or there's no challenge to it. But because you will always be able to come up with a challenge to it. Because Sarah could try and do her best to show me that her mother's mother. She could take the DNA test. And I said, yeah, but you could be the 0.0111 or 0.0001% chance of people where the DNA test got it wrong. Like I could always push back. And so what we have to do when it comes to belief in things is to look at it and say, okay, these other possibilities are here, but they are nowhere near as likely or don't make anywhere as much sense as what, this explanation is. And that's why I choose that route. So those are some of my thoughts I have on some of the things that you've said, ladies. Feel free to say what me again. That's fine.
We're running out of time here.
Oh,
this has been a really good conversation. I have a couple final ones that I want to ask you. But before I do that, I'd love just some feedback from Katelyn and Sarah for you, Alycia, and then I'll wrap up with these two questions.
That idea of there's nothing possible, if I'm wanting something so big that I can't disprove it at all and there's nothing possible, I think it's fair to say that there's nothing humanly possible. But if we're talking about God, then it shouldn't be up to humans. And he has the power. If he wants me, and I think similar to Sarah, of if it should not be impossible for him to make me believe, if that is what he truly wants. I agree of it's not humanly possible. And for me, you're saying the idea of the Lazarus coming back from the dead? Are those
Lazarus coming back? That's right. Yeah, it was Lazarus. I think that we were talking about when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Is that what it was?
I'm not sure. I don't.
Or was it Jesus who died? Because they both died and came from the dead.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Lazarus.
That there's no other possible reasoning documented. It makes logical sense to you to me, it makes logical sense that men lie. Men have lied for centuries, for
Mm-hmm.
eons.
Mm-hmm.
It is so much easier in my brain to get a group of men to lie about something than to do something. If we're talking about like possibilities, lying is so much more believable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to say that everybody who like that sort of thing are liars. Like I don't like that of like personal belief is personal belief, but that sort of thing, I think it's so much easier to make up a story that sounds better. Or, sorry, that came out wrong, but like it's
Came out just fine. It's all right.
okay, your turn.
I think we're going to have a part 2 of this conversation. Go ahead, Sarah.
I feel very encouraged to keep going, looking into things. I think, Alycia, you have a lot of good things to say, and I appreciate the thinking that you've done to be able to respond to our questions. I still have problems, and I think I will continue to have problems, but I don't think that that means I can't also have faith. And yeah, I just really appreciate working through these things together. So thank you for being here. And I would love to do a part 2.
All right. Final 2 questions for you, Alycia. And the one I just feel like it would be wrong not to address this. Free will, the gospel, if you wouldn't mind sharing that, if you wouldn't mind sharing what the gospel is. And as we've been talking about that idea of God forcing us to believe, I would love for you to touch on that. And then our final question I'll ask right after you finish that.
Oh, okay. So the gospel is a chastity ring. And
it's not, which is why we're talking about it.
It is not. It is not. But we just had to bring Katelyn's experience back in because I can imagine how she felt in the car, poor thing, when that came up. No. So yeah, it is interesting. Because, there's multiple ways in which God could have created. God could have created us in a world where He is the only option. We could only choose Him. We could only serve Him. And should He have done that, that would have been, great for Him, great for us to a certain extent, because it would have been great in the sense that we all were serving Him. But it wouldn't be great in the sense that we aren't really truly loving Him. And the reason why is because if you don't have a choice to not love, then you're really not choosing to love. It's the only option you have is to love. The only option you had was to serve God in that world. So there really isn't genuine love. And so this idea of, if God wanted me to believe, He'd make me believe, is actually contrary to the world that He chose to create. Because what He did is He chose to create us in a world in which we could actually choose to love. And that doesn't just mean love Him. It means even love each other. Because in that first world, if all we can do is choose to love Him and serve Him, then that means that we can only do good and we can only choose to love other people. So it means a love with your friendships, love with your family members. In that kind of world, once again, wouldn't really be love, because it's not something that you choose to do. It's like if I brought a guy onto our phone call and he's like 85 years old. He's married to this woman for 65 years, let's say. And I say to him, why her? Why did you choose her? And he's like, well, she was the only girl in town. That's going to make her feel one way. But if he says, well, Alycia, I was actually interested in another girl, and I went to this party and I was really hoping to get to talk to this other girl, but while I was waiting in the line for some punch, my wife walks up to me and she's waiting in line too, and we start talking. We just hit it off. And I think there's something special about this one. That right there would make her feel very different, because he could have chosen the other girl, but he chose her because there was something special about her. That is what real love would offer. And so for God to create a world in which we all were forced to believe And he made it so that there was no way for us to not believe. It'd be a world in which love was impossible. So he chose to create this world in which we can believe and we can choose to believe, but we can also choose to not. And a lot of people don't realize that there's people who do not want to believe, and they've said it. The famous one was the British actor, and I'm blanking on his name. But he was interviewed. What if you die and you find out actually there's a God? Because he's an atheist. If you find out there's a God, he goes, I don't want it to be true. I don't want to believe that. Like, there's people who don't want to actually believe that it's true.
I know who you're talking about.
You do, right? And I'm blanking on his name right now. But all that to say, so then therefore God creates a world in which we can choose him. But that also means the world in which we could choose to not. And all of the Bible story, believe it or not, is kind of about that story. Creating people who live close to him in a relationship with him. They turn against him because they have the free ability to do so. God's trying to find a way to bring him back. He sets forward a plan to bring him back, and then ultimately they're brought back. And that's really what the Bible from Genesis to Revelation is all about. Bringing people back into relationship with their God who turned away from him to do their own thing. And in order to do that, he has to make sure that we recognize that we can't get there on our own because we can't be good enough. There's no way for us to get there. And so God, being a good, just judge, says the consequence for things you've done wrong, just like what happened to Adam and Eve, is you will die. And that doesn't just mean physical death because they were separated from the tree of life, but also means a spiritual death. You will stay in a separate, broken relationship with God because of the things you've done wrong. You will stay in that for the rest of your life, for all of eternity. That's ultimately what hell is about. It's a broken relationship with God and really feeling the full ramifications of that. And heaven being the opposite, perfect relationship with God and feeling the ramifications of that. And so because of things we've done wrong, that relationship with God is severed. And the only way for that to be fixed back is if God himself comes, fixes it for us. So essentially, he pays the penalty of what we've done wrong. So essentially, we kind of are like riding into heaven off of his coattails. Like we're basically clothed in his goodness. That makes us good enough. I put in quotations here, only because of Jesus is clothing us with his goodness to be able to get into heaven. And so the gospel message is simple. It really is: believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is Lord, that he lived, he came, he died. He's the only way in which we can get to heaven. And that he isn't just a mere man, but there's something very divine about him. Hence why this doesn't say believe in your heart Jesus Christ existed. It says believe that he's Lord. That's a declaration of authority and divinity even. And you believe that God raised him from the dead and you'll be saved. So the gospel message is simply that. Believe this, that you can't get back to God on your own. You need his help. Jesus is the only way. And through his offer of forgiveness, if you accept that, you can be reunited into relationship back with God.
Thank you for sharing that. And also, maybe there's somebody listening who needed to hear that. I know I need to hear that message every day. Just remind myself of the gospel every day. And final question. The Finding Something Real podcast is about finding restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. All things that as believers we know ultimately are only found in Jesus Christ. Restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. Which of those things stands out to you the most in your life and why?
Restoration, eternity,
authenticity, and love.
Authenticity, love. Which ones? Well, I guess I would say depends on the season. Right now,
this season.
Yeah, exactly. I think it probably goes between love and restoration, but I love the restoration idea. I love the idea of restoring something that is broken and making it new again, or making it useful again. Kind of like the Japanese kintsugi bowls. I don't know if you've heard of those, when they make these bowls, just you have bowls, plates, cups, whatever. And then there's an earthquake and they fall, right? They fall and they break during the earthquake or whatever might happen. And a lot of people just take those broken pottery pieces and throw them away. But the Japanese kintsugi artist looks at those pieces. He says, I can do something with these broken pieces. And they take the broken pieces and they use like silver or gold or platinum as a glue, and they glue the pieces back together. So they don't look the same exactly as they did before, but they do become a bowl again. But this time they've got gold and silver and platinum kind of running through them. And so there's the idea of taking these broken pieces and making it something that's beautiful and good. And the average person might look at these pieces and take them and throw them away, but the kintsugi artist sees there's still value there. It's not over. Don't discard them. There is something still beautiful and good and useful I can make out of them. And he takes those pieces and he restores that bone and makes it into something new. And I think maybe in this season, I love the idea of restoration, of taking something broken like me and making it something new and beautiful, even if somebody else doesn't see me as useful or as worth saving. There's a God who says, I can see something in those pieces, Alycia. I'm not done, and can take those pieces and glue them back together. And now I'm useful again for something else.
Alycia Wood, thank you so much for being here on the podcast with us today. Katelyn and Sarah, thank you so much for being here as well. Until next time.